Hello and welcome to Health Affairs This Week. I am your host, Jeff Byers. We're recording on August 21st, 2025. Health Affairs has a lot of virtual events coming up in the next couple of weeks. So just want to tell you quickly about all of them. A lot of them are free. There is one insider event on August 26th. We have a free virtual event that will explore independent dispute resolution for our provider prices in the commercial sector series. On September 3rd, we have a free issue briefing for our next month's theme issue on the insights about the opioid crisis. On September 17th, we have a lunch and learn that's also free on the current opioids policy landscape and what's ahead. And on September 23rd, for insiders, we have a panel to discuss prior authorization, its current state, and potential reform. So we hope you'll join us for at least one of those. We're excited to see you in the fall. Today on the pod, to talk about mRNA vaccine policy, we have Kathleen Haddad. Kathleen, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Jeff. Nice to be here.
So HHS this month terminated 22 mRNA projects. So that equals about $500 million in contracts. Kathleen, what can you tell us about the details of that and what was the agency's reasoning?
So, Jeff, this is a decision under the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, which is an HHS agency. Secretary Kennedy announced that they will terminate these projects that include contracts with Moderna and Pfizer, the two pharma companies who worked with the government to develop COVID vaccines in record time that saved millions of lives in the U.S. and globally. Secretary Kennedy said that the mRNA vaccines failed to provide effective protection against upper respiratory infections like COVID and flu, and they posed more risk than benefit. This contradicts peer-reviewed scientific evidence, however. But before we discuss further, should we take a moment to refresh how these mRNA vaccines work?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. I'm not a bench scientist, but I have been a journalist, so I'll give this a shot. So mRNA is messenger ribonucleic acid, and it's found naturally in every cell of the body to help our DNA do what it's supposed to do, which is make proteins that repair cells and ferry chemicals around to accomplish basic biological functions that are needed to sustain life, like, build proteins and things like that I mentioned. This was
science things.
Yeah, sciencey things. It was identified in the 1960s from mRNA, and for decades, scientists have been studying it as a way to treat cancer and as a vaccine platform. This was ramped up about a decade ago when the Zika virus blew up. Then when COVID hit, the vaccine platform quickly was pulled into action and tested under all the routine FDA clinical trials and found to be safe and effective to prevent serious illness and death from the COVID virus. So the advantage of mRNA, as opposed to, let's say, whole virus or attenuated viruses that have been standard as a vaccine platform, is that it can quickly and flexibly be designed to counter viral threats as soon as the DNA of the enemy virus is sequenced. This only took days when COVID hit. And so under Operation Warp Speed, companies manufactured synthetic mRNA designed to mimic the spike protein that COVID creates on the surface of cells, and to do this before the COVID virus can do it. And that's so the vaccine's protein then stimulates the body's immune system to wage war on COVID should it enter the scene. I hope that was somewhat clear.
If you're a scientist, if you want to send email to me, where we got wrong.
Yes, please correct us. But I use scientists to help inform us on that one.
So how has this move fit into HHS's current policies on vaccines? There's been a lot this year.
Right. So Secretary Kennedy said the government will focus resources on whole cell vaccines, which have been around for about a century, which I find confusing because Secretary Kennedy has criticized whole cell vaccines in the past and cited problems with them as the reason for pulling U.S. funds from Gavi, the Global Vaccine Alliance. The cut to mRNA research comes after other moves by HHS to change U.S. vaccine policy. In June, the secretary fired 17 members of the whole committee of the CDC's Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, known as ACIP, and installed new members, some with anti-vaccine views. In May, HHS cut $600 million for research on a bird flu vaccine. And also in May, the CDC withdrew its recommendation for COVID vaccines for children and pregnant women. And interestingly, in response to that, just this week, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued updated vaccine recommendations that do call for COVID vaccines for children 6 months and older and healthy pregnant women. I believe those were their previous recommendations.
Yeah, and just as a quick note for all the stock heads out there, Moderna, who primarily works with mRNA technologies, their stock took a hit, or it's been down month over month, about by 13% for month over month from current date. I was looking at their stock prices just before we got on the call, and I will note that their stock prices is up from an all-time. They went public in about 2018, and their stock price currently is up from $8 to $26 per share, roughly, from that 2018 date to today. But it is significantly down from their big highlight of about $450 per share in 2021, which is, if you remember, that's when we were kind of in the thick of COVID-19 vaccines. So definitely down from $450 a share, roughly, but just kind of interesting to know. It is up, Max, but definitely has been going down. So you see the market kind of like reacting differently to the stock prices, and also compared to Pfizer, who also had a COVID-19 vaccine. They have a lot different products, work in different areas of the biosciences area, so they didn't seem to be as affected as much from the stock prices.
In addition, Jeff, some of these actions by HHS have just discouraged vaccine take-up, which is, I guess, a reason for the stock prices falling as well.
Yeah, and it should be noted that on August 12th, Jay Bhattacharya, who is the director of NIH, published a opinion piece in WAPO, or Washington Post, if you're formal, talking about some of this stuff. And the stock price for Moderna did go up. And is it a cause or a correlation in response to that opinion piece? Who's to say? But Kathleen, can you tell us a little bit about like what Bhattacharya wrote about, and like what's been the reaction from politicians when it comes to this mRNA reversal?
Yeah. Well, what he did was try to kind of not walk back the argument so much as refashion Secretary Kennedy's argument. He said that the reasoning for the rescission was that the government disseminated mRNA vaccines before gaining the public's trust. And so at the same time, several days later, the Post also published an opposing op-ed from Surgeon General Jerome Powell, who was President Trump's first Surgeon General and one of the shepherds of Operation Warp Speed. The back and forth of these two arguments are very interesting, and I can go over some points in each. Should I do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So Jay Bhattacharya made several points in his op-ed. He said that, quote, the mRNA platform failed to earn the public trust. He said the Biden administration chose a strategy of mandates rather than a risk-based approach and did not properly acknowledge Americans' growing concerns regarding safety and effectiveness. He said, quote, we lack clarity on how much antigen each mRNA molecule produces, where in the body the mRNA product winds up, how long it stays in the body, and whether unintended proteins are created. From a regulatory perspective, getting approval for a vaccine with such inherent uncertainty should be difficult, unquote. He said NIH would invest in new vaccine technologies based on whole inactivated vaccines, quote, which offer a broader immune response and have a longer track record of safety and public acceptance, unquote. He called the mRNA effort, quote, wishful thinking and performative consensus. So, former Surgeon General Jerome Adams, now a professor at Purdue University, did not take all this lightly. He said he was, quote, outraged by Bhattacharya's arguments. Yep. He called the NIH director's, quote, conflation of vaccine mandate politics with the proven science of mRNA technology irresponsible, a betrayal of public trust, and a direct threat to U.S. biosecurity. He said multiple vaccine types were studied at the outset of COVID, and mRNA triumphed because it was the fastest, most effective, and had the cleanest safety profile. I think his next point here is important. He said Peer-reviewed studies confirm the safety and efficacy of mRNA vaccines, which saved 20 million lives worldwide in their first year of distribution. He said claims about uncertainties and antigen dosing are baseless, and similar concerns apply to live attenuated vaccines such as the MMR, which has been safely used for decades. And he called the assertion that the mRNA vaccines turn the body into an antigen factory nonsense, his words, that is contradicted by evidence that mRNA degrades rapidly post-vaccination. He said that China's use of whole virus inactivated vaccines during COVID failed, and that this technology has been abandoned by modern scientists. Quote, its endorsement is what fuels public distrust, unquote. So I did do some other reading and about the biosecurity argument, and there were some interesting issues brought up there. Scientists have said that failing to move forward on mRNA research may threaten U.S. biosecurity for several reasons. One is that China may try to poach U.S. experts to work on mRNA, that the technology could be useful for us in combating biological weapons, and that having the technology itself just discourages enemies from using bioweapons in the U.S.
Yeah, and I'll just note, this is one article published on August 8th in Politico, but Politico wrote how the headline was Industry Frets Kennedy's mRNA decision will curb cancer breakthroughs. So with the subdeck being scientists and industry executives fear investors and consumers will shy away from the technology. End quote. So kind of interesting. You do see, based on one article that I'm sharing, a little bit of skepticism of like what this could mean for industry. So it will be interesting to see how this moves forward. But look, beyond that, what might the future of mRNA be, Kathleen?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned some reticence or reluctance, perhaps, that industry might feel in response to these decisions by HHS. The decision for rescinding the $500 million for mRNA vaccines applies to vaccines against flu and COVID, that research, but it does not apply, HHS says, against two vaccines that are being studied to fight cancer. And so those contracts will continue. But, it's interesting you said that maybe there's some distrust in industry that those could be at risk in the future. One other thing that I came upon is, some distrust perhaps that maybe there was some additional change that might be recommended by HHS in the normal vaccine schedule for children. And again, these, like you say, have impacts on industry and their involvement in this research. So one other point is that I think that there has been a fair amount of work on studying mRNA to actually figure out how to rid the body of HIV. And I believe that's going to be wound down as well. So that's about all I know on this topic.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of different stakeholders that have different potentially competing interests in mind when it comes to this thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And speaking of one particular set of stakeholders, just as a note, on August 20th, it was reported that more than 750 employees from the Department of Health and Human Services sent a signed letter to members of Congress and Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Wednesday, so on August 20th, calling on the Secretary to stop spreading misinformation. And they noted in the letter about potential claims to mRNA vaccines and how it, quote unquote, failed to protect effectively against COVID-19 and the flu. So another set of stakeholders that want to see an outcome in this situation. But just as a note, it's interesting to see how charged this issue is. And with that, I'll stop there. Well, thanks, Kathleen, for joining us. To you, the listener, if you enjoyed this episode, send it to the researcher in your life, and we will see you next week.